Parish President's Report, Mr. Jewell.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Congratulations to you as you start your new position this year. And I'll give just a happy new year to the entire St. Charles Parish Council. Looking forward to hopefully a quiet and productive year. Haven't had one yet, but we can always hope. Man can dream. First, I'd like to start with an update on Killona. These are just two pictures here side by side. One was probably the day after. The next is you can kind of see the work that we've been doing to clean it up. That work includes cleaning up the ditches from debris on both sides of the road. We wanted to get out there and start cleaning properties the very next day. We knew that we had to give a lot of our residents time to go through their belongings and take whatever they could get out. We also had to wait for Entergy and Atmos and a couple of other folks to restring the lines in there to connect anybody who could receive power to electricity. But we've been making great progress. Residents are signing ROEs with the parish, so a right of entry for us to get on the property and remove the debris, and we're working with them every step of the way to make sure that we are taking what they want us to remove from the property. We're also working with the state. The state is doing, I think I mentioned this, is doing a 75-25 on this debris removal. We have activated DRC to help with that debris removal process, as we're going to have to remove some large mobile home chassis and other items that we aren't really accustomed to handling as public works. So that is ongoing. We do have about 6 properties, soon to be probably 8 properties by tomorrow, that are ready to accept trailers. And we are expecting for trailers to go out this week for the initial installation. The installation will happen. They will be inspected. The electrical will be inspected after the contractor installs them. And once all of the utilities are hooked up, the keys will be turned over to the residents for them to occupy those. I'm very proud of the work we've been able to do. We've been able to move pretty quickly on this and been able to work through a lot of issues as we move on. So for sure, not done. Still a lot of work to do. And this is just in addition to all of the work we've done. Again, I want to say thanks to our Community Services Office, who has been tremendous at making sure that people receive the services and resources that they need during this process. We're going to continue to do that as much as possible. And again, I want to say thanks to all of the residents, both here and in other parishes, who have come to donate for the survivors of this tornado. I want to thank the folks who were running the Killona Firehouse as they distributed materials as well, and to thank all the nonprofit groups once again for all the help that they've been doing. We are very blessed as a parish to be able to have those resources and to be able to have people who come together and help our brothers and sisters in times of need. So we'll stay on the ground, and we will keep you all updated on that. We have wet ground conditions right now. As you know, we've been doing smoke testing in the Old Luling area and pipelining. Again, we do this smoke testing by pumping a non-toxic smoke into the sewer system and seeing where it seeps out. In those areas where it seeps out, that's where we know rainwater is infiltrating into the sewer system. So as we identify all these areas, the next process is coming back and lining the pipe. They use kind of it's not unique, but it is kind of a newer process where they will kind of push a fiberglass liner inside of that pipe. It cures and seals the pipe. So we are focusing on the Old Luling watershed. You can see phase 1, 2, and 3 because we've identified it through the sewer master plan as the most critical area with the most issues regarding infill and infiltration. After we're done with that, we will move on to another basin, as we call it, and start there. When we get that information on what basin that'll be, I will let you all know. But again, I want to get back to my notes here. The ground conditions are wet, which make the smoke testing a little bit harder to do. So they have postponed that to this Wednesday So Wednesday through Friday, so January 11th through 13th, the tests are going to be done so that we have time to allow the ground to dry out. We did send an updated press release on that. Sales tax numbers. So sales tax numbers for November were up 40% from November of 2021. So year to date, the figures are up by 11%. You know, I was talking to my directors and I was saying, you know, how's it up so much? Was it our Take Care of Business campaign? I'm still trying to claim that. But then I realized that when you have incredible inflation and everything costs more money, so do the taxes. So we're probably going to chalk it up to that. We hope that the federal government can get the inflation under control, and they could probably start by not printing so much money. But I'm off of my remarks here. We have the MLK book drive coming up. So RSVP, our volunteers, are collecting books for school-age children to celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s life and legacy of service. Bring a new or gently used book to the RSVP office inside of our Edward A. Dufresne Community Center, located at 274 Judge Edward Dufresne Parkway. The books can be dropped off from 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. And we were very successful with this book drive last year. We hope it's another big success this year. I had a short report tonight. I do want to turn it over to Luis. Luis Martinez did some great work after Hurricane Ida, determining how much land loss that we have from Hurricane Ida. And let me just say thanks to Luis for your initial report. GIS is one of those departments that really makes our life much easier. And as Ms. Cluley said, that the data that they are collecting is invaluable, and they are the data they collect is well worth the cost of that department. And I hope that in the future we will continue to expand that department and embed people from his department in public works and wastewater and waterworks to be even better about that data collection. So with no further ado, Luis, please give us your special report on Hurricane Ida, post-Hurricane Ida.
All right, thanks.
One moment,
thank you,
please.
President Jewell. Like you mentioned, I've been working.
We have a question from Ms. Gordon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick question. There are several residents asked about FEMA coming in. So what actually dictates FEMA coming in?
In regards to tornadoes? Yes.
Tornado.
Okay, thanks for that question. So there are thresholds that FEMA sets for individual parishes and the state, and it's a complicated matrix that they use that determines whether the federal government is going to come in and participate in a disaster. It usually requires a certain level of damage, and for an individual parish, that's a tremendous amount. If you recall the May 14th floods where we had over 300 homes flood, that did not meet the FEMA threshold for damage. And when I say it's complicated matrix, they look at people who are insured versus not insured. If you're insured, that doesn't count towards that total number. If you're not insured, it does. But not only do we not meet the threshold for this event, the state hasn't met their threshold with all of the tornado damage across the state. So while it would be helpful to have them, unfortunately, the Stafford Act sets that or makes the determination whether FEMA is going to come in or not.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gordon. Mr. Martinez?
All right, thank you, President Jewell. As you mentioned, I've been working on a little side project when I have a little bit of time. It's kind of near and dear to me, but prior to coming to the parish, I spent several years mapping erosion and accretion on the barrier islands and looking at the impact of storms on coastal communities and critical and sensitive habitats across coastal Louisiana. So with us having all the information, the data that we needed, and Hurricane Ida hitting home, it was natural that we run this analysis. This area, we focus on 7 or 8 areas here in the Salvador and Timken wildlife management areas. This area is dominated by freshwater marsh, and most of you are probably familiar with the term flotant, which means floating marsh, and essentially that's all this really is. It's a giant, a vast prairie of floating marsh. You know, it's just like a thick mat of floating marsh that's not really anchored down to the soil bottom. It's just roots and rhizomes that are floating on the water, and it's pretty vulnerable to erosion because it's fresh water, and the soil composition isn't as thick or sturdy as the clay soils in the saline and brackish marshes. A lot of the times, we look at the economic impact of the storm based on the widespread structural damage, but we tend to overlook the damage to our wetlands and stuff that are occurring with the passing of these storms. You know, everybody knows they're the buffer or the first line of defense to the storm surge that we have. So as the frequency and intensity of these storms increases, so does the threat these storms pose to our community. So I'm going to show you a series of slides of pre-storm, post-storm for these seven or eight areas. And it's hard to look at the whole area and say, hey, it doesn't look like a whole lot, but in the end, you'll see how much land was really lost. So.
Hey, Louis, before you go into that, just talk about the methodology, like how the satellite determines what we looked at.
Well, over the course of the years, we've been capturing the aerial photography, and with that, I've been including it's a color infrared band. The near infrared portion of the spectrum absorbs light pretty heavily, so it's easily to create and this is nerd talk, but it's if you create a ratio of a red band to a near infrared band, you can the water pops out, so you can really make a clear distinction between water and land. So if you just say water is a value of 1, everything else is a value of 0, then you can just say, hey, I got for 2021, you have a 2-color image, water and land, and then for 21, or for the next year, the same thing. So basically, you're just doing math, simple math in the long run. So using these algorithms for detection of water with the data that we do have is fairly easily. Since it's such a big area, computationally, it takes a long time to run these processes. And there's a fair amount of noise involved with it, like shadows and stuff. So the data I'm going to show you, I took out anything less than 10 square meters. So there's going to be, but these areas are pretty vast, and you'll see the amount of, we're talking about acres, not small pieces of land that were lost. So this area right here is just west of Bayou Cuba, the Gulf Canal, and this is pre-Hurricane Ida. If you look at 2020, and you can see some of the differences, and this is post-storm. You can see a lot of the fragmenting on the marsh fringes. And then just so you can see, in this area right here, just that tip is 127 acres. From that point in the bayou to where it touches land is almost 2,500 feet. So that's a pretty long area if you look at it. So just the grass, put in perspective. So you're looking at 187 acres just in this area right here, or 141 football fields. This area is just north of that. The diversion is just to the east. This is 2020, and this is 2021. So a lot of that open land, that's open water that was land converted to open water. So you're looking at about 82 acres just for this one area. Next one. This is the cabanage. If this is 2020 and 21, you can see it grows a little bit. And then in this area here, the red is land loss, the green is gain. These marshes are pretty, it's a unique ecosystem. They're most likely to die. So we don't look at net loss because they were pretty much just moved from one spot to the other. So it's hard to dictate really where where the marsh came from. Some of it might have come from Lafitte, Barataria. Some of it probably came from just north of here. But it washed down, and it's. I have a picture of what it looks like now. It's going to die. It's just going to degrade, wash away, and die. So we're looking at 300 acres here. This is what we call Otto Ponds or the North Ponds. Just west of that, you can see how much fragmenting occurred. All the red is lost, so it's pretty significant. So yeah, and then 366 acres here. And just Bayou des Allemands is to the left here. That's 21. This is probably the worst hit area right here. This is closer to the storm, the path of the storm, the eye of the storm. So 450 acres there. I think the next slide is Cuba Island. That's 2020. You can see a lot of it broken up in the red area, converted to open water. And 207 acres. And then I threw this in here because this is where the Davis Pond area, where the freshwater diversion is. It doesn't look like a whole lot happened, but you can see if you go, this is 21. So a lot of the wetland loss is kind of sporadic and widespread. I'm assuming it's because the marsh isn't as established. It's still growing as sediment water's being replenished in that area. So the roots aren't as established as the areas west of there. So overall, just in this area, we're looking at over 3,000 acres of land loss. So over 5 square miles. And I brought up in the director's meeting, trying to kind of put it in perspective, if you're looking at the area if you're standing on the corner of River Road and 310, and you go all the way down to the diversion on River Road, cut down to Highway 90, back up to Paul Mallard, back north to Hackberry, and back up to 310. If you converted all that to water, that's about the area that we lost. So that's a huge area. And for the East Bankers, if you convert all of Ormond, New Sarpy, Valero and Shell plants to open water, that's equivalent to what we lost. So it doesn't look like a whole lot, but over the course of time, as these storms start chipping away at these wetlands, we're looking at the storm surge getting closer to our doorsteps. So this is what it would look like typically before the storm, this area, and this is what it looks like now. This one's kind of hard to see, but what happens is that the surge pushes the marsh up, and it kind of causes it to fold. So you end up with these little creased areas all over where the marsh gets pushed up against each other. Some of it gets dumped on top of each other. And like I said, it just dies. It's really hard for anything to grow. And I just threw this in here because this looks at the area just south of us, like Turtle Bay and the pond, if y'all familiar with that in Lafitte. Look at the amount of area that was converted, the open land that was converted to open water. So that basically leads to the next slide. If we don't take any action within 50 years, all the dark blue area, that's where you're talking about is going to be, all that land would be converted to water. So basically the levee would be our shoreline. And this is the last slide. So this is just a map of all the levees, all the structures that are put in place as our storm system, protection system. So if you look, St. Charles is basically has an alley with nothing in between. A lot of that wetland was just devastated. So it's not to ring an alarm or bell, but it is something to keep in mind. But that a lot of times we take for granted, the benefit of these wetlands, and we could probably start looking at. I think it kind of opens the door for us to start looking for more restoration projects in these areas, because there's not a whole lot going on in that little alley, like I call it. So, and that's all I have, I think. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez, and thank you, President Jewell.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you again for doing that. I want you to go ahead and send that report to either Michelle or all the council members so that they have it for themselves. I plan to meet with CPRA regarding this. I know they've mapped coastal land loss throughout southeast Louisiana using a similar process. I don't know if they've zoomed in as detailed as we have on this, but as Louis said, I think we need to, in the future, have some more consideration for some of our coastal restoration projects. We do have one that should be happening this year, 1,500 acres on the East Bank in the LaBranche wetlands. That's a QIPRA project. from the conversations I've had with CPRA, if we can work with them and identify projects and engineer projects that they agree with, they will fund them completely. And so I think that kind of needs to be a part of our tool bag, especially with like Cuba Island and in some of these other areas like in Des Allemands, where that marsh that was protecting us, it kind of served its purpose. It was the first line defense. Some of it lost. And now with how much is open south of us, I'd hate to see what Oneida would do today to this area. So just want to throw my 2 cents in.